Please, I am not your enemy. The rancher stared, then defied his code for an Apache girl. Elias rode along the dry, dusty plains just as the sun began to sink low on the horizon. The sky was painted with streaks of orange and gold, and the air smelled faintly of sage and wild grass. His horse, a sturdy chestnut, moved steadily, unbothered by the heat of the day. Elias had been riding alone since early morning, checking fences, inspecting the water troughs, and making sure nothing had disturbed his cattle. Life on the ranch was hard, but it was the life he knew. He believed in order, in rules, and in keeping to the ways that his father and grandfather had followed before him. Among the small community of settlers, Elias was respected for his discipline and his loyalty to tradition. People said he followed the rancher code strictly, never meddling in matters that did not concern him, and never crossing the line with native tribes whom many feared or distrusted. As he rode, he kept his eyes scanning the horizon. The plains could be beautiful, but they were also dangerous. Coyotes hunted in packs at night, and the occasional rattlesnake could strike without warning. He was a man of experience, shaped by years of working under the hot sun, dealing with unpredictable weather, and facing life-and-death situations with both animals and humans. He prided himself on being cautious, careful, and dependable. But even the most careful man could be caught by surprise, and that was exactly what happened that evening. Elias noticed a movement near the edge of the creek that ran alongside his ranch. At first he thought it was a deer, or perhaps one of the stray dogs from the neighboring farms. But as he got closer, he realized it was something, or someone, much more fragile. There, huddled among the tall grass and shadows, was a young girl. She was thin, her clothes torn and dusty, and she seemed to have a wound on her leg that made her unable to move easily. Her dark hair fell across her face, hiding her eyes. But Elias could see the tension in her posture, the fear radiating from her like heat from the sun. She flinched as he approached, holding her arms close, trying to make herself small. For a moment, Elias froze. His heart beat faster. Not because of fear, but because he was torn. The girl was clearly in pain and in need of help. He could not ignore her. And yet, he had always followed the rules. Settlers did not interfere with the lives of native tribes. They kept to their lands, they protected their own, and they rarely trusted outsiders. Helping her could bring trouble, anger, or even danger. He thought of the warnings he had heard from neighbors and friends for years, how anyone seen aiding an Apache could be accused of betrayal. But when he looked at her face, pale and streaked with dirt, he could not bring himself to turn away. Not this time. Not when a human life was at stake. "Hey there," he said softly, trying not to startle her. His voice was low, calm, almost like the gentle rumble of his horse walking through the grass. "It's okay! I'm not going to hurt you!" The girl flinched again, shaking her head. Her eyes, wide and wary, met his for the first time. There was something in her gaze, fear, yes, but also a glimmer of hope, or at least curiosity. She said nothing, only hugged her knees closer, as if curling into herself could protect her from the stranger before her. Elias dismounted slowly, keeping one hand on the saddle and the other slightly extended toward her, showing he meant no harm. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small water flask. "Here," he said gently. "You must be thirsty." He placed it on the ground, not too close, giving her space. After a long pause, she cautiously took it, her fingers trembling. She drank slowly, watching him the whole time. Elias could see the dirt and scratches on her arms, the bruise on her leg that seemed painful even to look at. She was barely older than 15, maybe 16. And alone. He felt a strange pang in his chest. In all his years on the ranch, he had never encountered someone so vulnerable, so obviously in need of protection. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly, hoping to hear her voice. She shook her head again. She could not speak English, or if she could, she was too afraid to try. Elias realized that communication would be slow, difficult, and frustrating. But he had patience. He had worked with animals and stubborn cattle his whole life. He could manage patience with a human, too. "All right," he murmured, deciding to act before nightfall. "I'll help you." He lifted her gently into his arms, careful of her injured leg. His horse neighed softly, sensing the tension, but stayed calm. The girl did not resist. She simply rested her head on his shoulder, her small body trembling. Elias rode slowly back toward his ranch, each step measured and cautious. His mind raced with questions. Who was she?
Why was she alone? What danger had she escaped from?
And most importantly, what would he do now? By the time they reached the ranch house, the sun had dipped below the hills, leaving the sky a deep, dusky purple. Elias laid her down on a blanket in the corner of the kitchen, which was warm and quiet. He fetched a bowl of water and cleaned some of the dirt from her face. The girl watched him silently, occasionally flinching at sudden movements. But she did not run. For a moment, the air between them was heavy with uncertainty. She had no family nearby, and he had no clear plan. Elias knew he would have to act carefully.
The townsfolk were strict, often quick to judge, and fiercely protective of their rules.
Helping her could mean trouble, but turning her away would feel like abandoning her to a fate he could not bear to imagine. He remembered stories he had heard as a boy, tales of families torn apart by raids and violence, and he realized how fragile life could be.
One wrong step could lead to tragedy, but another step, the right step, could save a life.
Over the next few hours, Elias worked quietly. He bandaged the wound on her leg with strips of cloth, using a little of the salve he kept for his horses to ease the pain. He whispered reassurances, not knowing if she understood but hoping his tone could convey care. Slowly, the tension in her body began to ease. She closed her eyes briefly, leaning into the warmth of the fire. Elias felt a small sense of relief. For now, she was safe. For now, he had made the right choice. As the night deepened, Elias sat by the fire keeping watch. He thought about the choices ahead. Would he tell anyone about her presence? Could he protect her if someone discovered her hiding here?
How would he navigate the dangers that might come from both the settlers and the outside world? Every question weighed heavily on him. But one thing was certain. He could not turn away.
He had broken the first rule of his life, defied the code that had guided him for years, and yet, in that moment, it felt like the only choice a man with a conscience could make. Outside, the wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scents of the plains and the faint cries of distant animals. Inside, the fire crackled, casting shadows across the room. Elias watched the girl sleep, her breathing uneven but steady, and felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest, a mixture of worry, responsibility, and an unexpected tenderness. He had faced storms, wild animals, and men with guns, but nothing had prepared him for the weight of protecting a single defenseless life. By dawn, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the windows, painting the room in soft gold. Elias looked at her and silently promised himself that he would find a way to keep her safe. No matter the danger, no matter the cost, he would not abandon her. She had come into his life unexpectedly, but now she had become his responsibility, and he would face whatever came next with courage and determination. For the first time in a long while, Elias felt that he was not just following rules or tradition. He was choosing something greater, compassion. And that choice, he realized, might be the most dangerous and most rewarding thing he had ever done. The morning sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting long shadows across the ranch. Elias had spent a restless night thinking about what he needed to do next. The girl, Naeli, as he had quietly begun to call her in his mind, was safe for the moment, but he knew that safety was fragile. In the small town nearby, news traveled fast. Settlers were suspicious, quick to judge, and often unforgiving. If anyone discovered her presence, Elias could face anger, accusations, and even threats. Yet, as he watched her sleep peacefully, he knew he could not abandon her. Breakfast was a quiet affair. Elias offered her some bread and water, gently setting it on the floor beside her. She looked at him with wary eyes, unsure if she could trust this man who had saved her life. She had spent weeks hiding from danger, and trusting anyone was nearly impossible. But hunger and exhaustion made her reach for the food, her small hands trembling as she picked it up. Elias gave her a soft smile, nodding to show it was okay. He spoke slowly, pointing at the bread and then himself, saying,
Eat. Safe.
She nodded slightly, her lips pressing together, and took a small bite. Even as he helped her, Elias felt the weight of the world pressing down on him.
The rules he had always followed, the unspoken code of the rancher, were being broken. Settlers did not help Apache children. They did not interfere in matters beyond their land. But looking at Nayeli, he could see no enemy.
All he could see was fear, pain, and the innocence of a child who deserved protection. He realized that sometimes courage meant defying tradition, even if it meant risking everything he had built.
Elias spent the morning preparing a safe place for Nayeli in the barn. He cleared out old hay, laid blankets on the floor, and ensured that the spot was sheltered from wind and prying eyes.
He was careful to make it both comfortable and hidden. The barn smelled of dry hay and horses, familiar and safe to him, but perhaps strange and intimidating to her. He spoke softly as he worked, explaining in gestures and simple words what he was doing. Nayeli watched him closely, her eyes flicking from his hands to his face, trying to understand. Gradually, she began to trust that he meant no harm. By midday, Elias decided it was time to teach her how to move safely around the ranch. Walking on her injured leg was difficult, so he showed her how to lean on a stick for support. Step by step, she practiced, wincing in pain at first, but gradually gaining a little confidence. Elias encouraged her with gentle words and a steady hand. Slow.
Careful! You strong, he said, trying to reassure her.
Slowly, a fragile trust began to grow between them, built on small actions rather than words. Despite this fragile peace, danger was never far away. Word had already begun to spread in the town that someone had seen Elias near the edge of his land with a girl who was clearly not from the settlement. Rumors grew quickly, as they often did in small towns, twisting facts into suspicion. Neighbors whispered that Elias had brought danger onto the ranch, that he was betraying the settlers by helping an outsider. Some feared that the Apache tribe might retaliate if they discovered her, and others feared that helping her would invite trouble from other settlers. Elias could feel the tension in the air even as he moved quietly around the ranch. One evening, as the sky turned pink and purple, Elias noticed dust rising in the distance. A group of riders approached the ranch, moving quickly but cautiously.
They were armed, not necessarily with ill intent, but with suspicion and authority. Elias's heart tightened.
He knew that hiding Nayeli would not be enough if they came close. He hurried to the barn, helping her settle into the blankets he had prepared. She looked at him with wide eyes, sensing his concern. Elias whispered, "Quiet. Hide. Safe." Nayeli nodded, curling up on the blankets. The riders came closer, their eyes scanning the area. Elias stepped into the open, his hands raised slightly to show he meant no harm. The leader of the group, a stern man named Harris, rode forward.
Elias, he said, his voice sharp. We've heard rumors. Some say you're hiding someone, an Apache girl. Is this true?
Elias met his gaze steadily. He could have lied, but he knew that dishonesty could make matters worse.
She is hurt. I am helping her. She is not your enemy,
Harris frowned, clearly struggling with Elias's words.
You know the rules, he said. We cannot allow outsiders to stay on the ranch. It is dangerous. You are putting yourself and others at risk.
Elias's jaw tightened. She is a child, he said firmly.
She is alone and wounded. She is not a threat to anyone. She needs protection. That is what I am giving her.
There was a long silence. The riders exchanged glances, unsure how to respond. Some of them looked angry, others uncertain. They had grown up following the same rules as Elias, believing that outsiders were to be feared or ignored. And yet, here was a man standing quietly, calmly, refusing to follow the rules because he believed in something greater, humanity. Eventually, Harris signaled to the others, and they reluctantly pulled back,
We will watch, he said finally. But understand this, Elias. If anything happens, anything at all, you will be held responsible. Elias nodded, silently grateful that the confrontation had not escalated. He returned to the barn where Nayeli was peeking out from the blankets.
He smiled gently. They leave, he said, pointing to the horizon. She did not respond in words, but her small sigh of relief told him she understood. That night, Elias stayed close by, keeping watch over her while the fire in the hearth flickered and crackled. As the days passed, Elias and Nayeli began to communicate in small, simple ways. He learned some words in her language, and she picked up a few English words from him. Gestures, facial expressions, and shared routines became their bridge. He showed her how to draw water from the well, how to feed the animals without hurting herself, and how to keep her bandage clean. In return, she taught him how to find edible plants, where to spot signs of approaching animals, and stories from her childhood that she had carefully chosen to share. Though neither spoke much at first, their bond grew through actions, patience, and mutual trust. Elias noticed something he had never seen before, a quiet resilience in her eyes. Nayeli had endured fear, violence, and separation, yet she still carried herself with a dignity that commanded respect. He admired her courage and felt his own perspective begin to shift. The rigid rules he had lived by suddenly felt incomplete.
Protecting a child, helping someone in need, and showing kindness. These were values that mattered more than fear or prejudice. But he knew the danger was far from over.
Settlers would not easily forget or forgive what he had done, and the world outside the ranch could be cruel and unpredictable, especially for someone like Nayeli. Elias realized that he would have to make difficult choices, balancing the safety of the girl with the expectations of his community. He understood that courage was not just about facing the obvious dangers, but also about standing firm when the rules and opinions of others demanded compliance. One afternoon, while Elias was repairing a fence, Nayeli sat nearby, tracing patterns in the dirt with a stick. She looked up at him occasionally as if gathering the courage to ask a question. Elias noticed her hesitation and gave her a gentle nod, encouraging her without pressure. Slowly, she pointed at herself and then at him, making a small motion that seemed like a question. Elias smiled and pointed to the barn, then to the supplies he had prepared. She understood. It was a simple exchange, but in that moment, trust deepened.
Evenings became the time for storytelling. Nayeli would share tales of her family, her village, and her life before the violence that had forced her into hiding.
Elias would listen quietly, sometimes asking questions with gestures, other times simply nodding. The stories were heartbreaking, yet filled with moments of hope and cleverness. Elias realized that every person, regardless of background, carried their own strength, wisdom, and history. The world was not divided simply by the rules settlers had created. It was full of humanity, waiting to be understood. Through these small, careful interactions, Elias came to a quiet understanding. Protecting Nayeli was not just an act of kindness, it was a lesson.
It was a reminder that rules were made by humans, but morality and compassion were universal. Even if the townsfolk judged him, even if danger came, he knew he could not abandon a life in need.
He had chosen a path that required courage, patience, and a willingness to stand against fear, and for the first time in his life he felt the full weight and meaning of that choice. As the sun set each evening, painting the sky in shades of red and purple, Elias would sit quietly, watching Nayeli sleep safely in her blankets. The plains outside the ranch were still, quiet, and alive all at once. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and earth. Elias reflected on the fragile trust they had built, understanding that tomorrow could bring new challenges, new tests of courage. But for now, he allowed himself a small moment of peace, knowing that he had done the right thing, even if it defied every rule he had ever followed. And so, day by day, Elias and Nayeli continued their careful dance of survival, learning, and trust. Their bond grew stronger, not because of words alone, but because of actions, patience, and the quiet understanding that in a world full of fear and prejudice, sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was simply to show kindness. Days turned into weeks, and life on the ranch settled into a careful rhythm. Elias and Naeli had established a routine that brought both comfort and security.
Each morning they worked together to tend the animals, fetch water, and repair fences. Though they still faced the unspoken threat of discovery, they found small moments of peace in shared tasks.
Elias noticed that Naeli's confidence was slowly returning. She walked more steadily, helped with feeding the chickens, and even began exploring the small areas near the barn without hesitation. It was clear she was healing, both in body and spirit. Communication between them, though still limited, had grown richer. Elias had learned some words in her language, and Naeli had learned basic English. They relied on gestures, expressions, and patience to understand one another. Each small success, like her understanding a new task or responding to a word correctly, was a triumph that filled Elias with quiet pride. He had never imagined that teaching and caring could bring such satisfaction. For Naeli, these days were the first time in a long while that she felt safe enough to let her guard down, if only a little.
One afternoon, as Elias repaired a section of fence near the western pasture, Naeli wandered closer to the edge of the land.
She paused, watching a family of rabbits dart through the tall grass. Elias noticed her fascination and smiled.
"Quiet," he said, pointing gently to the rabbits. "See? Gentle. Calm."
Naeli nodded, crouching low to the ground and mimicked his careful movements.
It was a small but meaningful moment, a shared understanding of nature and life. Despite these peaceful moments, tension lingered.
Elias knew the town remained suspicious. Whispers and rumors had not stopped, and he could sense eyes watching from a distance. Some neighbors had even made veiled threats, warning that helping an outsider could bring trouble. Elias understood their fear. It had been ingrained in them for generations. But he also knew that fear was not a reason to abandon a life in need. Protecting Naeli had become more than an act of kindness. It was a test of his own courage and moral conviction. As the weeks passed, Elias began to learn more about Naeli's past. She had lost her family during a raid, forced to flee for her life. Her journey had been long and dangerous, filled with fear, hunger, and loneliness. Through gestures, drawings of the dirt, and the occasional word, she shared pieces of her story. Elias listened with patience, never pressing too hard, understanding that some memories were too painful to speak aloud. In return, he shared his own stories of the ranch, of the harsh winters and the long days of labor under the sun.
Though their lives had been very different, they found common ground in resilience, courage, and the quiet determination to survive. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Elias noticed a group of riders approaching from a distance. He tensed, recognizing the figures as some of the same settlers who had confronted him weeks before. This time, they moved with greater purpose. Elias hurried to the barn, signaling for Naeli to stay inside and remain quiet. She obeyed immediately, crouching low among the blankets. Elias stepped outside to meet them, trying to keep his voice calm. "Harris!" he called, recognizing the leader. "What brings you here?" Harris dismounted, his expression stern. "We've been watching," he said. "People are talking. Some claim you've been harboring someone, an Apache girl. This could bring danger. You know the rules." Elias met his gaze steadily. "She is not a threat," he said firmly. "She is a child. She needs protection. That is all." Harris frowned, exchanging glances with the others. "You are risking your reputation and your safety. Why help her? Why break the rules?" Elias paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because it is right," he said simply. "Because she is a human being, and no rule, no code should force us to abandon an innocent life." For a moment, silence fell over the group. The settlers had grown up with fear and prejudice, and Elias's words challenged their beliefs. Some looked uncomfortable, others angry, but none could immediately refute him. Slowly, Harris spoke again. "You are brave, Elias," he said, "but brave can also be foolish. Be careful." With that, the riders left, though their eyes lingered, a reminder that danger and suspicion were never far away. Elias returned to the barn, finding Naeli watching him with wide eyes. He smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Serve!" he said quietly.
She nodded, a small but meaningful gesture of trust. The next days were filled with lessons and small discoveries. Elias taught Naeli how to identify animal tracks, how to recognize edible plants, and how to avoid hazards on the ranch. In turn, Naeli shared stories of her childhood, of the games she had played, the songs she had learned, and the traditions of her people. Elias listened with fascination, realizing how little he had understood about the world beyond his ranch. Her perspective opened his eyes to a new kind of knowledge, one rooted in observation, respect for the land, and connection to community. One afternoon, while gathering firewood, Naeli stumbled over a rock and fell. Elias rushed to her side, concern etched on his face. Her leg, though mostly healed, still caused her pain. He helped her sit, carefully inspecting the bruise. "It's okay," he said softly. "You strong. Heal fast." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting both trust and relief.
These small moments reinforced their bond, showing that care and patience could overcome fear and hesitation.
Evenings were filled with quiet companionship. They would sit by the fire, Naeli drawing patterns in the dirt with a stick while Elias repaired tools or cleaned equipment. Sometimes they shared stories of their pasts. Other times they simply sat in silence, listening to the wind rustle through the grass and the occasional call of a distant coyote. These moments were simple, yet they carried deep meaning. They had learned to communicate without words, to trust without guarantees, and to find comfort in each other's presence. Elias began to notice changes in himself. The rigid beliefs he had held for years, the rules of the rancher, the fear of outsiders, began to feel incomplete. Helping Naeli required courage, yes, but it also revealed a deeper truth. Honor was not only about following tradition, it was about acting with compassion, even when it went against popular opinion. He realized that morality and empathy were more powerful than fear, and that true courage often required defying expectations. Naeli, too, began to change. Her fear slowly gave way to curiosity and cautious confidence. She explored small parts of the ranch, helped with feeding the animals, and even learned to ride a horse under Elias's careful guidance. Though she was still wary of strangers, she began to see the ranch as a place of safety, a refuge from the dangers of the outside world. She learned that trust could be earned, and that not every stranger was a threat. Despite the growing bond between them, Elias knew they could not let their guard down. The outside world remained unpredictable, and their secret was fragile. He continued to teach Naeli survival skills, always mindful of potential threats. At the same time, he prepared for the day when she might be able to reunite with her family or find a safe place among her people. Though the future was uncertain, he was determined to protect her until that day came. One morning, as the first light of dawn touched the ranch, Elias watched Naeli quietly. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more aware of her surroundings. Her eyes no longer held only fear. They reflected intelligence, resilience, and an emerging sense of hope. Elias felt a quiet pride in her progress. He realized that their time together had changed him as much as it had changed her. He had learned patience, empathy, and the courage to stand against prejudice. The bond between Elias and Naeli was no longer defined solely by necessity. It had become a connection rooted in trust, respect, and shared experience. They had learned to rely on one another, to understand each other without words, and to face challenges together. This bond, fragile but unbreakable, was the foundation upon which the next chapter of their lives would be built. And so, as the sun rose higher over the plains, Elias and Naeli continued their days of careful work, small victories, and quiet companionship. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to strengthen their bond. They had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, yet they had chosen trust, courage, and empathy instead. In a world full of rules, suspicion, and prejudice, they had discovered something rare and precious: the power of human connection and the strength that comes from standing together, even against the odds. Life on the ranch had settled into a fragile rhythm, but Elias knew it could not last forever. The calm days of trust and quiet companionship were threatened by the growing awareness among the settlers. Rumors about Naeli's presence had spread further, fueled by whispers and suspicion. Some townsfolk had begun to question Elias's judgment, while others viewed his actions as a dangerous betrayal. Each day, Elias felt the tension tighten around the ranch like an invisible noose. One late afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the plains, a group of riders appeared in the distance. Elias recognized some of them immediately. Neighbors he had known for years, men whose respect he had earned through hard work and fairness. But their expressions were tense, their eyes wary and suspicious. Leading them was Harris, the same stern man who had confronted Elias weeks earlier.
Now they rode with purpose, their pace steady and deliberate. Elias's heart sank.
He knew a confrontation was inevitable. He hurried to the barn where Nayeli was tending to a small basket of vegetables he had shown her how to grow. Her head lifted at the sound of his voice.
"Quiet!"
he whispered, placing a finger to his lips. She nodded, understanding immediately. Elias gestured for her to stay inside and remain hidden among the blankets. She obeyed without hesitation, her eyes wide with apprehension. Stepping into the open, Elias faced the approaching riders. "Harris!" he called calmly, though his stomach tightened with unease.
"Why are you here?"
Harris dismounted, his face serious.
"We've come to see the girl," he said.
"Settlers say she is hiding here, and they fear what might happen if she remains. You know the rules, Elias.
You are risking your safety and theirs by harboring an Apache child."
Elias met his gaze steadily. "She is no threat," he said firmly. "She is a child."
"She is injured and alone. I am helping her because it is the right thing to do. I am not betraying anyone. I am protecting life."
Harris's jaw tightened.
"You are breaking the law of the settlers and our traditions," he said. "Why risk everything for one child?"
Elias paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because morality is stronger than fear," he said. "Because doing the right thing is sometimes harder than following rules."
"She is human, just like us. She is not an enemy."
The group fell silent, and for a long moment the only sound was the wind rustling through the tall grass. Some riders shifted uncomfortably, while others scowled. Elias could sense the conflict in their minds. They had been taught to fear outsiders, to follow rules without question, and to protect their own above all else.
Yet here was a man standing firm, quietly insisting on what was right rather than what was easy. Finally, Harris spoke again.
"You are brave, Elias," he said slowly. "But brave can also be foolish. If anything happens to her, or to the ranch, you will be responsible."
"I understand," he said, "but I cannot abandon her. Not now. Not ever."
Harris studied him for a long moment, then signaled for the others to step back. "We will leave," he said.
"But be warned! Eyes are watching. Do not underestimate the danger."
With that, the riders turned and disappeared over the horizon. Elias exhaled slowly, his shoulders sagging with relief. He returned to the barn, where Nayeli had been watching silently. She looked at him with wide, trusting eyes, and for the first time, he felt a sense of quiet triumph. They had faced confrontation and survived, their bond strengthened by the courage it had taken to stand firm. Over the next few days, Elias focused on preparing for any further challenges. He reinforced the barn, making it more secure and less visible from the main road. He gathered supplies, ensuring that Nayeli would have enough food and water, even if outsiders returned. Each task he completed brought a small sense of reassurance, though he knew the threat of discovery was never far away. Despite the tension, Elias continued to teach Nayeli. He showed her how to identify the tracks of animals, how to move quietly across the land, and how to recognize signs of approaching danger. In return, Nayeli taught him the skills of her people, how to read the stars to find direction, how to use plants for healing, and how to move with caution through the wilderness. Their lessons were more than survival skills. They were lessons in trust, patience, and understanding. One evening, as the sky turned shades of pink and gold, Elias and Nayeli sat outside the barn watching the horizon. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we must be ready."
"More people may come. We must be calm and strong."
Nayeli nodded, her small hands folded in her lap. She had learned the meaning of courage through Elias's example, and though fear still lingered, it was tempered by trust.
The following day, as expected, the settlers returned, this time with more riders. Their eyes scanned the ranch carefully, searching for signs of the girl. Elias met them at the edge of the barn, standing tall and unyielding. Harris led the group again, his expression stern but slightly less hostile than before.
"We cannot allow this to continue," he said. "You must hand her over. The settlers demand it."
"This is not just about you anymore."
Elias shook his head. "She is not theirs," he said. "She is a child."
"She is alone. She deserves protection. I will not hand her over to anyone who does not have her best interest at heart."
The group hesitated, clearly taken aback by his unwavering stance. Elias could see the struggle in their eyes, the conflict between what they had been taught and the truth they could see before them. Nayeli, hidden in the barn, watched silently, her heart pounding. She knew the moment was critical, that the actions of Elias could determine whether she remained safe or faced danger once more. Harris took a deep breath.
"You are asking us to trust your judgment,"
he said slowly.
"This is not easy. But we see your commitment. If you are certain she is safe and that no harm will come to the town or the girl, we will allow her to remain. For now. But know this, any sign of trouble and responsibility will fall on you."
"I understand," he said, "and I accept it.
I will protect her no matter what."
With that, the settlers reluctantly left, their eyes lingering one last time on the barn and the figure of the girl they had been told to fear. Elias exhaled, relief washing over him, though he knew the struggle was far from over.
They had won a temporary reprieve, but the world beyond the ranch remained uncertain and unpredictable. That night, Elias stayed close to Nayeli, tending to her and ensuring she was comfortable. She leaned against him, exhausted but safe. "You brave," she whispered softly, using the few English words she had learned. Elias smiled gently. "No," he said.
"We brave together, you strong too."
The bond between them had deepened through this confrontation.
They had faced fear, threats, and the harsh judgment of others, and they had survived.
Elias realized that true courage was not just about physical strength or adherence to tradition. It was about standing firm in the face of injustice, protecting those who could not protect themselves, and choosing empathy over fear. In the days that followed, Elias and Nayeli continued to strengthen their routines and skills. They practiced moving quietly across the land, identifying edible plants and tending the animals. Nayeli grew more confident, her trust in Elias unwavering. Elias, in turn, felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known. He had challenged the expectations of his community, faced the threat of anger and suspicion, and emerged with a deeper understanding of what it meant to be honorable. Despite the temporary peace, Elias remained vigilant.
He knew that more challenges could come at any time and that the bond between him and Nayeli would be tested further. But he also knew that they were stronger together, that trust and courage could overcome fear and prejudice, and that doing what was right often required defiance and steadfastness.
As the sun set each evening, painting the plains in shades of gold and crimson, Elias and Nayeli sat quietly by the barn. They shared small stories, learned new skills, and cherished the moments of calm between storms. The world outside might be uncertain, and danger might still lurk on the horizon, but within the walls of the ranch they had created a space of safety, trust, and growing understanding. In that quiet, fragile peace, Elias realized that protecting Nayeli was more than an act of kindness. It was a testament to the strength of the human spirit, a reminder that courage and empathy could defy fear, and that true honor lay not in blind adherence to rules, but in the steadfast choice to do what is right. And so, despite the looming threats, Elias remained unwavering. He had chosen to stand for what mattered most, knowing that courage and compassion would guide him through whatever challenges lay ahead. Nayeli, once a frightened alone child, had found a protector and a friend. Together they had faced the confrontation of their lives and emerged stronger, their bond a quiet but powerful force against the uncertainty of the world outside. The weeks after the confrontation passed slowly but steadily. Elias and Nayeli had found a fragile rhythm again, though the shadow of suspicion still lingered. The ranch, once a place of simple routines, had become a sanctuary, a space where trust and courage had been tested and strengthened. Elias knew that their time of safety might not last forever, and he prepared himself for the day when difficult choices would have to be made. Yet, in the quiet of the mornings and evenings, he found moments of peace, watching Nayeli explore the barnyard, tending the small garden he had shown her, or studying the tracks of birds and animals with growing fascination.
Elias had begun thinking about the future more seriously.
He realized that while he could protect Nayeli for now, he could not keep her hidden forever. Her family, or her people, might still be searching, and the ranch could not remain a secret indefinitely. The thought of her reuniting with those who cared for her brought both hope and worry. She deserved to be with her family, yet the world beyond the ranch was uncertain and potentially dangerous. Elias knew he had to prepare for the eventual moment of transition, ensuring that she could leave safely when the time came. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Elias noticed a rider approaching from a distant trail. The figure moved cautiously, a rider unfamiliar to him. He felt a mixture of curiosity and concern, unsure if this person was friend or foe. Elias guided Nayeli to the barn and signaled for her to remain calm and hidden. He stepped into the open, waiting for the rider to arrive. The rider stopped a few yards from him, dismounting slowly. It was a man from the Apache community, a scout who had been searching for lost members of their people. Elias could sense the urgency in his movements, the concern etched into his face. "Are you Elias?" the man asked. "I am," Elias replied, keeping his voice calm but firm. "I have someone here in need of protection." "She is safe." The man's eyes widened slightly and he nodded. "Then I have come to help bring her home," he said. "We have been searching for her. She has family, and they have been worried." Elias felt a surge of relief mixed with apprehension. The moment he had anticipated had finally arrived. Nayeli had family, and now there was a chance for her to be reunited with them. Yet he also knew that saying goodbye would be difficult, both for him and for the girl who had come to trust him. He returned to the barn and knelt beside Nayeli. "There is someone here to help you," he said gently. "It is time to go home." Her eyes widened, a mix of surprise and fear. She clutched the blankets tightly, unsure if leaving the safety of the ranch was the right choice. Elias took her small hands in his, speaking softly. "You are strong," he said. "You have learned so much. Your family is waiting, and you will be safe. I will stay here, but you must go." Tears welled in her eyes, and she nodded, understanding the truth in his words. Slowly, she allowed the scout to guide her from the barn. Elias watched silently as she walked toward the man who had come for her, her steps cautious but steady. He felt a pang of sadness, knowing that their daily companionship would end, but also a deep sense of satisfaction. He had fulfilled his duty not only as a protector but as someone who had guided her through fear and uncertainty towards safety. The scout nodded respectfully to Elias. "Thank you," he said. "Without you, she might not have survived. You have shown courage and heart. She will remember you."
Elias gave a small, humble nod.
"Take care of her," he replied. "She is brave and strong."
"She will do well." As the scout and Nayeli disappeared over the horizon, Elias felt the weight of quiet reflection settle over him. The ranch seemed unusually still, the wind carrying only the sounds of animals and distant rustling grass. Though the girl was gone, the lessons and bonds they had formed remained, etched into his memory. He realized that true courage was not only about facing physical danger, but also about standing firm in one's beliefs, showing empathy and protecting those who could not protect themselves. In the days that followed, the ranch returned to its regular routines, yet Elias noticed subtle changes in himself. He was no longer the man who simply followed rules without question. He had learned the value of compassion, the strength in defying fear when morality demanded it, and the quiet power of trust and patience. The experiences with Nayeli had shaped him, giving him a deeper understanding of humanity and the importance of standing for what is right, even when it comes at personal cost. Elias shared his experiences quietly with the few townsfolk he trusted, those who had always known him as a man of integrity. He did not seek praise or recognition. He simply spoke of the lessons learned, of courage and compassion, and of the importance of protecting life above all else. Slowly, the rumors that had once threatened him began to fade, replaced by a cautious respect. People realized that sometimes rules and tradition must be balanced with humanity and empathy. Meanwhile, Nayeli had returned to her community, reunited with family who had been searching for her tirelessly. Though she missed the safety and care Elias had provided, she carried with her the lessons of survival, courage, and trust that he had instilled. She shared stories of the ranch, of the kindness of a man who had risked everything to protect her, and of the bond that had grown between them. Her family welcomed her home with tears and relief, grateful for the man who had safeguarded their child during a dangerous and uncertain time. Elias often thought of her, wondering how she was adjusting to her family and community. He took comfort in the knowledge that she was safe and that he had made the right choice. Though their paths had diverged, the connection they had shared remained a quiet reminder of the power of empathy and courage. He continued his work on the ranch, tending the land and caring for the animals, yet he carried with him the understanding that life's true value lies in the choices one makes for others. In the evenings, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elias would sometimes stand at the edge of the plains, gazing toward the distant hills. He remembered the days of fear and uncertainty, the quiet moments of trust, and the acts of courage that had defined the time he spent with Nayeli. He understood that life would continue to bring challenges, but he now had the knowledge and confidence to face them with empathy, courage, and unwavering moral conviction. The ranch, once a place of strict routine and unquestioned rules, had transformed into a symbol of resilience, compassion, and human connection. Elias had defied tradition, risked reputation, and stood firm against fear. In doing so, he had protected life, nurtured trust, and discovered a deeper understanding of honor. The lessons learned through his time with Nayeli would remain with him forever, guiding him through future challenges and shaping the way he approached both his work and his relationships with others. Months later, news arrived that Nayeli's family had settled in a safe location away from the threats that had caused their separation. Letters and occasional messages reached Elias, recounting her progress, her health, and her continued bravery. Each message was a reminder that the choices he had made had lasting consequences, and that courage and compassion could ripple outward, affecting lives far beyond his own. Elias reflected on the journey that had begun with a chance encounter on the plains. A wounded child, alone and afraid, had arrived at his ranch, and he had made a choice that would change both their lives forever. Through trust, patience, and courage, he had not only protected her, but had learned invaluable lessons about humanity, morality, and the meaning of true honor.
As the years passed, the memory of Nayeli and the time they shared remained vivid. Elias continued his work on the ranch, but he did so with a renewed sense of purpose.
He understood that strength was not measured only by physical labor or adherence to tradition, but by the courage to act rightly, even when faced with fear, opposition, or uncertainty. The story of his defiance, his protection of a vulnerable child, and the bond they shared became a quiet legacy, one of empathy, bravery, and the enduring power of human connection. And so, the plains remained, wide and open, carrying the winds of history and the echoes of choices made with courage and compassion. Elias, standing at the edge of his land, could feel the enduring lesson of his journey. That in a world often divided by fear and suspicion, the true measure of a person lies in their ability to protect, to trust, and to act with unwavering humanity. The story of Elias and Nayeli became more than a tale of survival. It became a testament to the enduring strength of empathy, the power of moral courage, and the quiet but profound impact that one person's choice can have on the life of another. In the end, it was not the rules or traditions that defined honor. It was the courage to stand for what was right, the willingness to protect the innocent, and the strength to defy fear in the pursuit of compassion.